Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Political Power Hour. My name is Devin Plummer. I am an FHSU student here on campus, and today we're going to be talking about democracy in general, like its involvement and sort of why it's important. And today I'm here with.
I'm Madison Albers. I'm also an FHSU student. I do a lot around campus. I'm one of the American Democracy Project coordinators. I'm a Loudlight Fellow. I'm the president of Pi Sigma Alpha. I'm an SGA senator, and I'm a Young Dem. So I do a lot in participating with our democracy.
Nice. Yeah, I know like the first like introduction sort of, I guess I had to, but I guess it was a couple years ago. Um was that like the whiteboard questions like
Hmm.
in the union, and that it the responses are always
Yeah,
sometimes funny to me.
they are.
um but yeah, definitely something that's important, and uh to just like to I guess get people talking, I
Hmm.
suppose. um and there are unfortunate things that sort of happen when it comes to that, uh like I'm sure, no doubt you heard of, like, with the the chalk day.
Yes.
um it's things like that where it's to be expected, unfortunately sometimes. um but it uh obviously shouldn't stop the conversation from happening. And I think, yeah, that's kind of where, at least to me anyway, that's sort of like the underlying, like, uh, sort of crux of like democracies. Like, we gotta
Yeah,
keep the
civic
conversation going.
discourse. Yeah, no, I totally agree. When it comes to our board, our Tiger Talkback board, that's the whole goal of it is civic discourse. The whole point is that we're not supposed to agree. It's supposed to have things that have people talking, that have people really upset sometimes because there are hard questions, but that's an important skill for college students to know is how to defend your beliefs, how to get to mutual ground with other people because civic discourse, whether it sounds pretty or not, still helps us uphold our democracy, which is a sacred duty.
Sure. Um, Sort of a big question right off the bat. Uh, and I've sort of talked a little bit about this in like other podcasts, but uh, I think it's definitely one like worth repeating. So why democracy? Why
Why?
why why is it a good thing?
So
I agree.
that's
I agree it's a good thing, but like,
yeah.
why do you think?
No, it's a complex question, and I explain this to people all day because they're like, "Why do I need to vote? Does it even matter? How does this affect me?" But I think we all know that, especially when our voices are stifled, whether it be some kind of control over what we can post on social media. Maybe our work gets vandalized in the
Mm,
quad. We don't like when we can't have a say in what's going on around us. We don't like when our representatives aren't representing us,
mm,
and that's where democracy comes into play. It gives each and every one of us a role in bettering the community that we're in and bettering the nation that we're in. So that's why democracy is representing yourself at a local, national, and state level. Why democracy is bettering your community by doing some service about issues that you care about. Why
mm,
democracy is even protesting when you feel that your country is not
mm.
representing you or your choices or your values or your voice. Why democracy basically gives you a giant megaphone so everyone can hear your voice and you can find others who hear your voice and you can make a say in how your nation is shaped.
Sure. Yeah. Uh, yeah, I'd have to agree. It's a pretty good answer. Um, yeah, I think that's a sort of uh, good thing to sort of jump into, like, um, with on the like topic of uh, civil obedience and
Hmm.
disobedience and things like that. it's sort of tough, right? Because I guess that's true that we're not in a uh, pure democracy, a
Yep.
representative democracy, and it's tough, right? When your representative gets into office and can't do the things that um, he or she says to do for unfortunately a variety of reasons. Um, and I think we can both agree that yeah, when that time comes, um, there's definitely a place when the government is sort of seeming to fail certain people.
Yeah,
It's the
definitely.
time for a little bit of like civil disobedience.
Yeah. Yeah, we've definitely seen that in recent years. And I mean, I think a lot of people look at it and they're like, wow, this is tearing our country apart.
Hmm.
This is just, why are we doing this? How can people do this? And I was having a really great conversation a couple days ago with one of my professors because we were talking about the Israeli Palestine crisis. And we were talking about like how can people do this? How can people like, just commit these violent acts and crimes? But then we have to take a step back and we have to look at our country. Why are people being pushed to do this?
Mm.
Why are people out in the streets instead of, doing things that are maybe a little less violent or causing an uproar? But that's because everyone needs a place for their voice. Like I said earlier, we all get fired up when we don't get a chance to say how we feel or feel represented. So, I mean, we got to make change also. We got to have our representatives listen to us. We've got to have our politicians listen to us. And that's not only at a state level or a national level. We have local elections coming up, and those
Hmm.
make a huge impact on our day-to-day lives. So, yes, civil disobedience again looks kind of ugly,
Mm.
but it's up to our politicians to listen to what the people are saying as well and at least, respond, understand their positions so we never get pushed to a point where we're, doing dangerously violent, actual not civil disobedience, but just
Writing and yeah.
violence.
Um, I definitely agree. Yeah, one of the like all time heroes of this country for sure, like Martin Luther King Jr. definitely practiced that where he um just I can't remember the exact quote. I wish I could, but it to paraphrase it, it's something about like um it's like something about like hate and violence because only can
Mm-hmm.
breed more like hate and violence. So you have to come at it from a place of um which it's tough because whether it's any issue or it's immigration, abortion, whatever it is, it's silly when people are like, why are people so upset about these issues? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, it both of the all of them like a lot of our hot button issues right now are it's a lot of it's very personal. So it's of course you got to understand why people are emotional with it. Um, but also at the same time, I think you gotta come at the issue with a sense of uh, I guess cordiality, sort of a sense of calmness to try to approach the across the aisle in sort of a civil manner. Because yeah, I think that's the only way that anything anything will really get done.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think we do need to start things off very, civil. But I think a large part of why things do escalate in this country is because there's so much people and you can see that people want change. There's
Hmm.
large groups of people, on media, in the streets, calling their representatives. But there's no change.
Mm-hmm.
There's not even, necessarily acknowledgement of what's going on because, sometimes politicians don't want to get their hands dirty. They don't want to get into a hot topic issue or that's not what they want for their position, and then it pushes people to go further.
Mm.
So it needs to be a good relationship between the people and the people who are representing them because that's what democracy is about. It's about the people's will, and
Sure.
if our representatives aren't carrying out the people's will, then the people are going to get mad.
Yeah. No, I think well, like you maybe brought up earlier, like with the debate we had a little while ago, like I mean I wouldn't want to assume, but I would venture that you and I have pretty extreme differences, like in our
Probably.
thoughts. But um, I mean that's kind of the whole reason, like I wanted to do this, is to talk to people that I don't agree with, and I know I don't agree with. But uh, I think it's yeah, like we said, it's definitely important. Um, I guess let me throw this question at you. With like a lot of the problems that like we see within the United States, um, and it's sort of easy to blame, just go straight to the blaming politicians,
Mhm.
but maybe the is it the people's fault that have elected those politicians?
Yeah. So one thing I will say is we don't have enough voters putting their will into our
Sure.
elections. I will definitely 100% say that. And not in a way to discourage people, but a way to encourage people. Because a lot of times what I see is people are so mad about what's going on, but they haven't voted because they don't believe it makes a change, especially if you're a Democrat in a red state or you're a Republican in a blue state. I mean, it can be, really just seeming impossible. But that's
Yeah.
important because even if you're not in the majority, making your voice heard is important. And yes, I agree, sometimes there's a lot of blame of politicians, but I think a lot of it comes from is we have this, majoritarian system, so only one party gets a say. And I
Mm.
mean, there's no changing that. Let's be so realistic right now. We're going to have a majoritarian system, but that means that the minority, is not getting their say, and it's kind of, it's difficult to enact change from without some legislative help is what
Mm.
I will say. Because I mean, like, when we look at locally, um, I personally have been working on, and people on this campus have been working on for the past 20 years, getting a polling place on campus.
Yeah.
And I mean, as much as we put together information, statistics, we gather community support, it ultimately relies on one person, and that's an elected person. So I do agree people need to show up to the polls, but I think one of the hardest thing is no matter who wins, there's a loser. And
Mm.
there's going to be a losing team as well that's not going to, necessarily get what they want out there. But I always think there are ways to enact change on little levels too. Like, I think a lot of times when we talk about civic engagement, we talk about big things like
Mm.
voting or like civic discourse or civil disobedience. But sometimes we don't think about the little things we can do. And sometimes those little wins, I feel like personally help me feel more satisfied in my community.
Mm.
So, I mean, maybe like on a national level, we're really upset about poverty and, wage gaps and all of that. But on a local level, as a little win, we can go volunteer our time or support like First Call for Help, which helps impoverished people right here in Ellis County,
Mm.
does a food bank, helps people get gas. Even if it's not, legislative change, there's always ways to make little change. And I know sometimes actually the legislative the legislature route is long,
Mm.
hard, difficult. So I would always say to anyone who's feeling, upset or wants to make a change, give yourself a couple small wins by
Mm.
volunteering your time, maybe organizing groups around you to help volunteer their time, and work on bettering your small community a little bit first to, just give yourself a sense of accomplishment and a sense of that you are making change and you are devoting yourself to something valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. I think you're definitely right where um it starts in like the hometown. Like that's definitely what I want to do. Like after I graduate, is definitely go back home and start at like maybe the place that I know best. Um, and I think that's true, right? And I think that's one of the cool things about like this country is you can, like when you lose an election, that's not where you have to stop. You can continue to do things. Um, and I think that's also a pretty solid truth too. Is sometimes we just like, and there are issues worth caring about, like poverty and like immigration, like these huge things. Um, uh, but like it's an unfortunate deal where like kind of us folks at the local level have
Mhm.
no practical way of you know just snapping our fingers and
Yeah.
fixing the issue. So it's it's an unfortunate deal where I think you're right, where you can empathize with the bigger issues and try to elect who you can to fix those. But yeah, I think if you um start at the local level is probably the best. But yeah, it's such a tough deal. Yeah, with the bigger issues.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And that's exactly what I was saying. Like, and of course, you can always mobilize, organize groups, and get connected with other people, in your state to make change. One of the organizations I work for is Loud Light, and they have, I work with a group of individuals at K State, KU, Pitt State, WSU. So individuals all over the state. So it's another important thing to like, yes, legislative legislative change is hard and difficult, but never give up on it.
Mm.
You can do both. You can give time or even donate money because I know some of us are, crazy busy and we feel bad about not giving enough time. You can also give resources. Any of us can go down to our Tiger Food Bank right now
Mm.
and give a can of beans, and that's still civic engagement. That's still bettering your community. But at the same time, we can also work to mobilize local groups, get our voices out there, even on small levels like a debate to, let our voices be heard, or writing down a comment on the whiteboard in the union, or even texting on Twitter to our question because we're also on Twitter, or X now.
Yeah,
X.
I'll never call it X.
But I mean, you really can do both, and I would just say never give up on either of them, because I know that one of them is like, seems like this just uphill trek. But even if it takes 20 or 50 years to get a polling place on campus, and maybe I'll be dead by then, I'll be celebrating in my grave because I gave a portion to that big movement of people.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's um uh I don't know if, because I personally haven't traveled outside of the country, but from what I've heard from like individuals who have, that this sort of blend of like liberalism and democracy, they sort of you know very much complement each
Mm-hmm.
other. And from what I've heard anyway, that seems somewhat unique to the United States, to like have these ideas like you said, and that's something we definitely agree on. It's this relatively new system of a government not run by one person or a few very powerful individuals. It's a government by the people for the people. And um, I don't know if that's something that maybe it's just media or just a couple of outlier politicians, but it almost to me seems in a way that some of the higher ups maybe have that backwards, that they're in charge of us, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, not really.
Yeah, no, I think this really goes to the delegate trustee model, and that's the model where, and then there's a third option, but I can never remember what it
Mm.
is. It's basically a blend of the two. And the delegate trustee model is basically models that our representatives kind of will use to represent us in our government. So the delegate model is like they're just a speaker of the people. They represent the people's will. Even if it's not what they think is right,
Mm.
that's their job to
Yeah.
put the people's will. So maybe everyone's not making the smartest decision, but that's what the majority wants, so that's what they're going to do. But the trustee model is, you know, taking, they elected you because they believe in you. So what you think is right
Mm.
and will be best for everyone is what you should do. Maybe it's not the people's will, but they elected you for a reason.
Sure.
And then there's a third one, but I can never remember the word for it. And it's kind of a blend of the two.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we need because, like, I agree. People's will is important, but, like, everyone's not always going to make the best decisions. And, like, if all of a sudden Ellis County wanted to, 90% of our population wanted to ban like 75% of the books in
Yeah.
here, that would obviously be a terrible decision. So
Right.
sometimes it's up to our representatives to kind of, make the best choices for us, but it's also up to them to represent our will as well, especially in important issues that we are, care a lot about, that are the hot topic issues. And so I will admit it's a really hard job to be a legislator. You've got to blend both of those. You've got to also blend with, who's supporting and backing your campaign financially. And you're also in a group of so many other people with so many different views from so many different places. So it's hard to be a legislature, and I will give them that.
Sure. Yeah, as something you touched on very much is like having so many different people from so many different backgrounds. That's something interesting too. Is sort of the neat thing about democracy is that everybody, wherever you're from, can voice that issue. But like you said, it's with a lot of people, there's going to be a lot of different
Yeah.
issues, and um, it's unfortunate because, people may see their issue not being solved, and it's possibly a thing of people wanting to solve it, but practically, how do you get it done? And um, maybe that has to do more with larger issues, but it's so tough because it's interesting to think about like the different like types of like issues within the country, and always worth like taking a look at, is this sort of the best system like to have in place for this. And I know there's a lot of people that like disagree with this, but like me personally, I think like comparatively to like the rest of the world, at least with our government, like with our like economic system we got going on, like the two like just different things we got going on. Like honestly, it's like one of the best in the world.
Yeah, I think we have some major issues that
Sure,
are
no
coming
doubt.
up with, our economic system, our governmental systems. But I think the hardest thing is that we have to be realistic, because I would love to just sit and think about theory in an ideal America where we have a exactly proportionate Congress that's exactly proportionate to us, but that's not going to happen within the next 10 years or maybe even 20. But I think we just have to work with our systems as much as we don't want to.
Mm.
And we can, enact change on smaller levels. Like, obviously, like I said, we're never going to move to a pluralist system in America. That's just not feasible. And I know a lot of people who are like, well, it would just make it easier. We would just have such a much more fair
Is that
democracy.
something you'd be in support of?
See, that's the thing. Of course, like pluralism, it makes sense that it's more representative. Of course it is. You get 7% of the vote, you get 7% of the representation. There's no losers really in that system.
That's UK does that
Mhm.
with is it in their parliament.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you form coalitions with
Yeah.
that. So like the Green Party moves up with like the Labor Party.
Hmm.
And so obviously like there's benefits, but let's be so realistic. In the United States, that would require like a whole um constitutional amendment that just like
Yeah.
takes away power from a bunch of our articles that we already have set in place for our election systems, our term limits, like
And if like this is a majority of
mhm.
what the country says they want, um, I suppose that's the responsibility of the government is
Yeah.
to sort of bend the will to at least the most amount of people that they can.
Yeah, and of course it is. And I mean, if it were to ever be like the majority and we all just sort of banded together to
Sure.
like move towards pluralism, you know, there is constitutional amendment routes that, you know, do rely on like people coming together. Like,
Mm.
what was it? It was the 18th Amendment. That was the only amendment we had pushed through in a different way. I can't remember what it's called, but by Rally of the People.
Gotcha.
And that was the prohibition of alcohol.
Yeah, which is insane.
Mhm.
The United States told itself that we no longer have the right to consume alcohol.
And that was the only amendment that was ever overturned by another amendment. So
Yeah.
even
Whoops.
that wasn't super successful. So I mean, that's what I'm saying when I say we got to be realistic, because when we're divided as
That's
we
like
are
the
right
outlier,
now,
not the norm. That's
Yeah,
probably the
yeah.
unique situation.
And like I don't think we'll ever get to a point, because I mean our country was founded on this majoritarian system, and I mean it doesn't say anywhere in our constitution that there will be two parties, but that's just what our system creates, our electoral system creates. And I mean,
Is it at all possible that it was? I don't know. This might be a better question for Jay, but um, I wonder if it's at all possible because, like, as we Federalist, Anti-Federalist, the beginning of the Constitution itself is a compromise.
mhm.
Um, really, sort of, maybe, yeah, between the North and the South, sort of, which is interesting to think about that. Um, but it's I wonder if born out of that division, that's where the party started, the Anti-Federalists and Federalists, who, you
Mhm.
know, after a bunch of change way down the line, turn into the Democratic and the Republican Party. But yeah, no, it is interesting that some of the founding fathers, Washington,
Mhm.
sort of called it to warn against. I think that was his warning against political
Yeah.
parties. Um, it's just, yeah, this is a good.
Yeah.
I think we all can say, yeah, boo, we hate political
Mhm.
parties, but I guess, yeah, on the flip side, like you said, the like kind of what's the alternative?
Mhm.
Like a pure democracy? I don't know if that would go very, like larger states with more populations would unfortunately kind of
Mhm.
seem to rule that. Um, and like you said too, with the if you would sort of go down the like UK Parliament route, that yeah, probably talking an amendment, and that would sort of nullify other things that we have in place. It's like, yeah, where do you go?
Yeah. So yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. We've got to be realistic, and we've got to look at realistic ways we can enact change. And I mean, you know, maybe you're upset about, and I mean, I think all of us get to this point at some point when we're like, I don't like my presidential candidate, but
Yeah.
you really only can vote
Hey,
for one or the other.
college Republican, you're talking to yeah.
But I mean, but that's where you start small. That's where you, okay, that's where you go, you know what? Maybe President Biden or President Trump isn't enacting immigration policy that I would like to see. So maybe you look to your state legislature and maybe someone's running on those issues. And then if not that, then maybe you look at what you can do to start making a change. I mean, this isn't an extreme for me. Not everyone can do this. But I mean, I've always been really passionate about immigration policies and immigration in the United States. And so that led me on a career path, which I'm pursuing right now, to be an immigration attorney because I want to
Cool.
make change. And, you know, it can come in all different forms in all different ways. So, like I said, again, take two paths, you know, always support the things that you believe in, even if they're not in the majority. And then also look at ways you can create small change. Just here in Ellis County, there are so many ways you can support the beliefs you have. Even here on campus, we have young Democrats, we have college Republicans, we've got Students for Life, I believe they're called. At one point, we even had a uh, socialist club here on
Oh, really?
on
When was
campus.
that?
I'm not sure, but if you look on Tiger Link, there's a socialist club, but it's not active right now. But I mean, even if those aren't things you care about, maybe you care about, you know, the education system. We've got Teachers for Tomorrow. Our education major is like a huge part of this campus, and like that's a really hot topic right now is all the things in education. So even here
Sure.
on campus, you can look to all these groups and find people who have similar beliefs, and you can mobilize and you can, you know, make a change even here on campus. You can, and I mean, change doesn't also necessarily have to be like, you know, changing an institution or changing a system. Maybe just helping to educate people around you about the issues you care about and maybe
Mm.
helping to gain to your movement. That can be change too. That can be support.
Yeah, I think that brings up an interesting point too. Would I guess like as we brought up like Twitter earlier, I've seen jokes online where it's like that is the perfect, like if you go to Twitter, that's the perfect reason for like the electoral college because like not everybody is, you know, within their right mind. But I think that joke sort of has a interesting topic behind it is um talking about who should vote, like very much so. I think always will be in the camp of uh just about everybody. Obviously there are laws where you no longer have the right to vote. Well, you know, if
Mm.
commit, you know, a pretty heinous crime. um and that's the deal for everything. Like if you um you know, with the limits of the amendments, if you the limit is if you harm somebody while doing it, sorry,
Mm.
you've revoked you revoked that right. Um, but talking about participating in a democracy, I think you bring up a good point. Uh, I think there's too many uneducated participants in democracy, and it's um, and yeah, it's something I want to make clear is I think obviously everybody should have still the right to vote, but I don't know how you get to fixing the issue of um, people not really taking a look at issues, just saying red or blue and vote for you.
Yeah, that's definitely an issue we've seen, you know, recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to voting and who should vote, that's a tricky question. But here's my answer: everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone should vote because even if maybe it's not our most educated population or maybe not our most peaceful population, it's our population. It's the people who live here. So, of course, there's got to be, you know, some rules around it. Like, you can't vote till you're 18 because
Sure.
nobody wants a 6-year-old
Yeah.
voting in our elections. But,
Yeah.
you know,
I can't remember who it was, but I don't know. Was it? I could be wrong. I don't know if it was Nancy Pelosi or I don't know. I thought I could be wrong, but I thought it was somebody in the Democratic Party was talking about like lowering it to 16,
yeah.
and I was like,
And there's been movement around that.
they were eating Tide Pods a couple years ago.
Yeah, I honestly don't know if I would support that or not. You know,
If anything, I'll be honest. If anything, if we would change the age, I think I would go higher, not lower.
See, I think something that's like, you know, yes, changing the age would include a different another group of people, but I'll be realistic here. I don't think that many 16-year-olds would vote. I don't think that many 18-year-olds vote. I
No,
mean, on
because I like in high school, I didn't care.
mhm. On campus, 75% of our on at Fort Hays State University, 75% of our registered students vote. There is a whole group of people who have all the, they're registered. All they have to do is put in a mail-in ballot or get to the polls, but 25% of them don't. And, voting is scary for a lot of people. A lot of people are, I mean, we literally have an event sometimes called Voting Isn't Scary. It's Halloween themed. We do voter registration
Nice.
and voter education. But yeah, I think, when it comes to who should vote, of course, everyone, within reason. And I think when we come to like felonies and stuff, the interesting thing about Kansas is if you do have a felony, as long as you've served your whole time, including probation, and paid all your dues, your fines,
Mhm.
all of that, your right to vote is reinstated. And
Mhm.
a lot of Kansas felons don't know that, which is kind of sad because they don't realize
They figured if I committed this crime,
yeah,
then I'm done.
yeah, and they don't realize they do get their right to vote back, which is incredibly important because I think one of the gray areas around taking the right to vote away from people in the prison system is in an incredibly corrupt country that could breed a lot of issue. I
Mm.
mean, there's been some legislation in Kansas that certain groups can't even do voter registration anymore because it's a felony if you impersonate an election official. But the wording around it is so vague that even doing voter registration, like here in the Quad, could be considered a felony. And, you know,
Mm.
like a person like that could have their right to vote taken away. And, there's just like a danger around that because, I mean, once you can take a person's right to vote away and you know how to do that, then legislation can become kind of murky. But I think it's important for everyone that can vote to vote. And
Sure.
I think when we talk about like the education of voters, I get it. It's hard. We've got 10 candidates on the school board. I think we've got 5 on our city council. Don't quote me on
Mm.
that. That's, like 15 people you have to research right there. Then you look at our presidential ballot and there's, 2 people, but then there's just a lot of research and education that has to go into it. So I understand when people are like, I just don't know and I don't have the time to know.
Sure. Or even with voting, like
Mm-hmm.
when
Yeah.
I worked over I work with my brother and my dad in construction over the summer, and 40-hour weeks, and then it's not like we go home and do nothing. We got
Mm-hmm.
we got uh I'll use a different word that starts with S. We got stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
Um so like it almost seems like I think that would be a really good idea too of like I think we talked about like more days,
Yeah.
possibly maybe more days for voting, perhaps a federal holiday for
Mm-hmm.
just to vote, because it's not like I don't think a lot of people who uh, work for a living, that's their priority.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Yeah.
like, can I support the house? All this other stuff that's going on, I
Yep.
don't have the time for it. And
Yeah.
it's like I don't blame them because like I'd argue that that's probably more important.
Yeah.
And it's a deal where it seems like you have a very limited window. And I could see the argument where it's like the government's telling you when and where you can enact your
Yeah.
First Amendment right.
Yeah. No, I mean, and here's my other issue is that I think some of our politicians that we have elected don't value young people's vote because they see us as lazy. They see us as
Mm.
like, if you cared about voting, you would find a way to vote. But I personally, I work 2 jobs here on campus. I'm in about like 50 different clubs.
Mm.
I'm a full-time student, and there are people who work, day in, day out. And, you know, I think our goal, like especially on a local level, is to make voting more accessible.
Mm.
If we look here in Hayes, there's I think 5 wards and multiple precincts in each of those wards. So, I mean, you've even got a specific place where you've got to vote. I don't know if you know about this, but like I said, I was part of the charge to move a polling place to campus. Uh, for the majority of 6th Street, 7th Street, 8th Street in our campus residential, they vote in Ward 1, Precinct 1 and 2, which used to be at the K-State Research Center on Main. I don't know if you've ever seen that little chunk. It's kind of next to the do you know where the new Cold Stone Creamery is being created? Anyways, it's kind of down on Main.
Gotcha.
It's not too far, but the parking lot is tiny and horrendous to park in.
Gotcha.
And was historically the lowest performing in Ellis in Hayes. And so
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of deterrence for people to vote.
And there's that. And, some people look at that and they're like, college students don't vote. They're lazy. They don't care. They, if they wanted to vote, they would just go vote. But, that's not always the easiest. A lot of us have a lot of classes, and that's why it's important to, make changes to be more representative.
And I don't have any numbers. I'm just talking like out loud here, but I almost guarantee if you were to put a place on campus, like that number would shoot up.
Yeah, and that would, So, but in the charge, so I did personally meet with Bobby Dreiling, our county clerk.
Oh, yeah.
Because this was headed by the American Democracy Project at first.
Cool.
And she was actually, her location for, I can't remember the ward, but it was a ward sort of in the middle of town, was St. Michael's. And they were not ADA compliant, so they had to be closed. And so since ours was also low performing, they closed ours as well. And they were planning to consolidate the two and pick a new location. Now, we made a tremendous effort, and if you want a whole episode on what that effort was, I could probably talk for another hour, to show multiple locations on campus that would be incredibly viable for community. I mean, we've got great parking lots. We've got ADA compliance in all of our buildings. But we've got great locations here, and it invites the community to our campus and strengthens those relations. But unfortunately, the location that went with was a Lutheran church that is in the middle of town. So now not only did our polling location not get on campus, it's actually moved so much further away. Which is hard.
Why a church? I don't.
Most of the polling locations are in churches. Surprisingly, just they're
interesting. I know, like the one back home. Like I go to Westmoreland is where I go, and there's just like a community center in town.
Yep.
And I mean that's fairly easy. It's because Westmoreland's a fairly small town, and it's just right on Main. You can't miss it. That's interesting, though.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of our student population doesn't know about, that.
Yeah, I didn't know it was in a church.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that some people look at is they're like, well, nobody's registered here in Hayes. Maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe.
I know, like me, like I'm registered for back home. Like that's where I go to vote.
Maybe it's difficult to vote here. Maybe people aren't used to the voting system. I mean, it's different. Like I'm also from a small town. We have one polling location, not 5, and it's not designated by my residential area. But I believe that our students, if they had a polling place right here on campus, would change their registration.
Sure.
I even petitioned people, ADP petitioned people in the union to ask how many of them would change their registration to Ellis County if we got a polling place. And we got a lot of response from that from just a couple of hours in the union, because I think a lot of people would. I mean, mail-in ballots are confusing. A lot of us are 18 when we're freshmen, so we're new to voting already. We've got to figure out a mail-in ballot, and like, you know, there's a lot of fear around mail-in ballots too with recent election security. So like someone's like, oh no, am I committing voter fraud if I put this in the mail? And then, or they have to drive all the way back home. And for some people, that's a 6-7 hour drive on a Tuesday.
It's not going to happen.
That's not really feasible. And so then we have 25% of our registered students aren't voting. And I think when I look at it, we have 62% of our campus votes. That is not high. And when you compare it to other KBOR schools like K-State, KU, they have a on-campus polling location. Their numbers are in the 70s, 80s.
And
that's
they're obviously much bigger. And yeah, I mean, that's
WSU also has an on-campus polling location. Emporia's is just like the block across from the campus. So if we put it like where Chuck's is or something like that, that's their location. But all of these schools have higher voting rates than Fort Hays.
Yeah, you're almost getting me like fired up here. Like I want to get one on here.
I think if our students knew more about this, and like honestly, I don't think Fort Hays should be falling behind in anything. And I think something that we don't look at when we think about attracting students is like, let's have civically engaged. Let's create like people who
more
are
events,
civic minded in their community. Like let's create graduates that are gonna vote, are gonna do service, are gonna have all that, because I think those are key skills. But yeah, I don't think a lot of our students know about it. I would love to get the word out a little bit more.
Sure.
But I think it's really heartbreaking that we don't have a location on campus. And I mean, we've had a lot of support. College Republicans President Alex Johnson wrote an op-ed with Ella Burrows and Ryan Stanley, our last year's SGA president. They all wrote a letter of support with the
who'd you guys send that to?
That is actually in our Tiger Media.
Gotcha.
So there's, a letter to read, and I've got a bajillion statistics about all the voting rates of our campuses and the voting rates of Fort Hays. And, there's statistics to show that it would raise our voting rate.
Did you guys take that to a certain representative?
Yeah. So we took all of this information to Bobby Dreiling, because that's our county clerk. That's who makes this decision.
Sorry, maybe you said it already, but like, what was, because he said no, obviously. So like, did he give you guys a reason behind it?
So she.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. So I'll just explain the situation really quick. She had said the union was too far of a walk from the parking lot to the second floor in the ballroom, was too far of a walk for voters to be expected to.
Which parking lot?
Like the front of the union, the MCAT parking lot.
Okay.
To the ballroom or the black and gold room. That was
maybe that's a rule. Like
it's not. It's just she just didn't think that was too far for voters. That was unrealistic. Okay. So we moved away from the union. We were like, got it. And I mean, and the thing is, the union's got 2 elevators as well. So ADA compliant, I wouldn't say there's a lot of reason for the union not to be a great place for it.
I would
agree.
A lot of
student traffic as well. So then we moved to, we showed her the Coliseum, big parking lot,
sure,
accessible. There was 2 issues. The Coliseum was not getting air conditioning till this summer or last summer, I believe.
I see.
The heat was an issue, and then she pulled out a lot of potential election dates. So, like, in our legislature, there's been like a couple of dates that have been talked about, like for primaries and stuff like that. But they're dead bills. They aren't even active in our legislature. So she pulled out those dates, and they didn't work with the Coliseum because they were like basketball season. So we reworked the plan in 2 days. because she was like, I'm gonna make a decision. In like 2 days, we had got approval from Cunningham to have one of the gyms open, no matter the time, the date, the place. But the only issue was that like there wasn't AC in Cunningham. But 2 large fans, we were guaranteed, we have classes in Cunningham. I don't think, personally, that would really be a concern.
It's not like people are going to be hanging out there for an hour.
Yeah.
Get in, get out.
Yeah. So we presented that, and we've also, spoken to UPD about clearing off, parking, so that wouldn't be an issue either. All this, work. We've got also support letters from Faculty Senate, SGA, Staff Senate, Campus and Community Collaborative. We were working on one from Grow Hayes. But by the time we had that prepared, she said she had already chosen another location in that 2-day turnaround. And that was the Lutheran Church, but she did not announce the location until about 3 weeks afterwards. So,
yeah. Sounds like a little miscommunication.
Yeah, I would say one of the issues is no matter how many solutions we find, there just always seemed like there was more problems.
Sure.
And like I said, not a lot of FHSU students are registered here in Ellis County, but I think that's an effect of where our precinct is, where our location is, and that, why would people register here? There's not like really motivation to, but I think a location right here on campus would significantly change those numbers. But she wrote an article. She said it's just simply not economically feasible. But again, we were moving a location. So since she consolidated the two, there's already poll workers that were working a second location, a polling machine for that location. So.
Gotcha. I guess, unfortunately, as we sort of wind down on time here, man, an hour always goes by when you're talking about stuff you like. But I guess I'll leave you with maybe sort of like maybe like a lighter, funner question. Talking about like engagement here on campus. What do you think I know there's there's the debate and maybe a few others, but I know that we had talked about maybe just a night for the students specifically where they could come and talk to political organizations and just have a night of just questions. But what are some events that you would like to see on campus to get people engaged?
I think definitely the panel idea between the College Republicans and the Young Dems would be such a fun idea. That's kind of centered around just like talking, not so much debating, with the student body to be present and ask questions and kind of talk about how they feel about politics and all of those things. But I also think that bringing more representatives and senators to campus to speak to students. We already have legislative coffees here in Hayes during the legislative session, but those are on Saturday mornings, so not a lot of student body is up and at 'em to go to the library and listen. So maybe making those more available to students during times that work for students would be really great, because to hear from Rick Billinger, our senator, Barb Wassinger, our representative, and to hear what they're doing to represent us would be really great. And I think we already have some awesome events that aren't often utilized. Earlier this week, we had our candidate forum for our local candidates, our school board, and our city council.
Was that last night?
That was Tuesday night.
Tuesday, right.
Mm-hmm. But that was a great chance.
Oh, and somebody was, I can't remember his name. Somebody was in the union not too long ago.
Oh, was there?
I think there was like a press conference or something. I can't remember. Something in the state of Kansas. I can't remember who
Yeah.
it was. But yeah, no, I definitely agree that um, bringing people here and just continuing to talk about it um, is definitely, and yeah, there are definitely things that I would want to do. Like I think we'd sort of thrown around the idea, like within, um, like with Catholic Tigers and like the uh, pro life organization, just to have like not make, I guess, like a huge event out of it, just like make it real simple, but just have like a table out in the Union
Yeah.
with like the banner and just like I don't know if you're familiar at all with like Steven Crowder's like Change My Mind.
Oh,
You've probably seen the
yeah.
meme.
Yeah.
But like not like that sort of content, but like if
Mhm.
somebody would want to come down and like just
Discuss.
talk it out, if they have any questions about it, and yeah, just kind of go from there.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think that would be a great idea. Events like just big
Yeah.
and small, to get people talking about it, because they're, and like I was for a long time, until I don't know, something clicked. This is a sense of apathy, like just kind of whatever happens.
Mhm.
I can't change it, so who cares? And I think if there were maybe if there was less of that mindset, maybe there was
Yeah.
um, maybe some things would get done, but
I
who
agree.
knows?
Yeah.
um, yeah, unfortunately, that kind of run out of time. I thought this was pretty good, pretty solid conversation, and it sounds like there is a lot more that we sort of like touched on that we couldn't fully go into. Um, that of course I'd be down to talk about. I guess is there anything that you'd like to uh, state or have a question, or is anything you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, of course. First of all, thanks for having me.
For
This
sure.
is so much fun. First podcast ever.
Yeah.
But Election Day is November 7th.
Yeah.
Make sure you get out there and vote. You can already request your mail-in ballot, and registration deadline has already passed, but just for any college student out there, you can register at your college address. So
Yeah.
getting involved in your local politics when you're here, because we're here for like 10 months,
Yeah.
is really important. You're spending your tax dollars here.
Sure.
But make sure you get out and go vote on November 7th for Hayes. Early voting will open on Monday at the Administration Center. So make sure you get out and get the vote out.
Cool. Alrighty. Well, I want to thanks everybody for listening. This has been another episode of the Political Power Hour. We will see you next time.